Well, welcome back, everybody. Hope you had a nice moment to relax. Grab a drink, get ready to go, because I am super excited to welcome Kim Breen. So Kim Breen has done a lot of work with Kern County, and we just love her and feel like she's a member of our team. And we're so excited that she's here. For those of you who don't know her, Kim is a national behavior change agent affiliated with the University of Kansas's Swift Center. KOI education and affecting behavior change. She supports schools, districts, counties, and state teams across the United States with training and coaching and the multi-tiered systems of support framework. She's most known for her virtual coaching model and emphasizes integrating initiatives, including positive behavior supports, social emotional learning, and family school community partnerships. Kim has held lead roles within the statewide MTSS PBIS networks of California, Illinois, New York, and Hawaii. Tough job there, Kim. And has driven school reform as a school counselor, district coach, and school psychologist. Her publications focus on family-driven Tier 2, Tier 3, and system-wide implementation. I'm really excited to welcome Kim today for this session. The session's going to look a little different. Just wanted to let you all know that Kim and I are going to have a conversation. I'll ask her some questions about how we should approach SEL in this distance learning environment, and she'll provide some answers that are directly related to your teaching and learning plans. So with that, welcome, Kim. Are you here?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, so it won't let me turn my video on yet. I think I need to maybe be made a co-host, or sorry about that. It's saying I don't have permission.
I think you're right. Apologize. I think you should be good now.
Awesome. Excellent. Awesome. Thank you very much. Excellent. Hi, Krista. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be with you all. I can't see your faces, but you're all welcome to give me a smile and wave back. We can get a little social interaction in there. I think so highly of my Kern County people, and I think you have Riverside and a bunch of other people from around the state here. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Krista, for doing this sort of interview style with me today. I know so many of us have been meeting this way for so long, and we might be getting a little PowerPointed out. And so I'm really happy to just kind of have a chat about this.
Awesome, Kim. Well, if you're ready, we'll just jump right in.
Perfect.
Okay, so our first question today is, what are the social emotional implications we should consider prior to engaging students in academic learning?
Sure. So lots of implications, right? Lots of things going on right now. We sort of have this like double, maybe triple whammy happening for so many of our students and our families right now. But I want to note that some of the things we'll talk about today are really the same things that we would have done and should have done even before this, right? So it's just that we might do more of it now. And so one of the implications is to really be ensuring safety. And so everyone knows, you can't learn when you don't feel safe. And that's physical safety, emotional safety, even social safety. And so anything and everything that we can do to help our children feel safe before we engage in academics, that should make sense for everyone, that it's going to help the mind be calm enough to engage, calm enough to learn. And so, you always would have started your school year off by making sure students knew how to ask questions and knew how to get help, and that they kind of got to know the people in their classroom and their leaders. And so you would do that still, but we just probably will do more of it than we would have before, right? A little bit more emphasis. So as we go through this 1 hour together, be thinking in your mind, some of the strategies we talk about, we want to use them to address safety. And then the second implication, I would say, is about connectedness. And so relationships matter. There's a lot of research out there that indicates that we learn better from people we like, and we learn better from people who we think like us. And so it's really important to express that. I feel like sometimes we throw these phrases around like relationship building, and it's sort of like we check it off and move on, right? But we really want to take that very seriously this year, especially. So getting to know your students, getting to know their families wherever possible, because some children may have lost loved ones. Some children may be very much more afraid because they have a bigger impact for a number of reasons, economically, health wise. That people might have even been moving. There's a lot of things that could have been happening. So the more you get to know your students, it's also going to help you understand why they might perform a little differently before you jump into academics, and then let you know maybe what you could do a little differently. So, once we're thinking about safety and we're thinking about connections, the other implication I want folks to have in their mind is strategies, specific strategies to promote social emotional learning. And so we're going to talk a little bit about those as we chat, me and Krista here today. But we're happy to provide more resources after today as well. And I'll reference a couple websites you can go to get more information. But it's this idea that we can't take it for granted that children just know how to do these things. We really want to build in explicit strategies. And we're going to talk about adults too, I think, Krista, right? How like we as adults need these strategies and supports as well. And, I think now more than ever, we need this reminder for self-care. And it's like, we all know better, right? We know we should walk away from our computer and stretch. We know that we should move around and we should take deep breaths when we feel stressed. But it's so easy to forget about those things, right? It's so easy to forget those strategies ourselves. And I think the last kind of big implication I would comment on is this idea of connecting to prior knowledge. And so, we really need to make sure that, whether there was learning loss or not, we always want to connect back to the last thing the student learned on that area in that topic. And so, our teachers know how to do this. You start Wednesday's lesson with a quick refresh of Tuesday's lesson, right? And so that checking for understanding and that connecting the prior knowledge. So now that bridge might have to be longer, right? That last lesson feels longer ago, and we're not even sure how many kids got it. So I know it's a hard concept, but I think, we might not be jumping into brand new academic content in the beginning of the year. It might be a little bit more about connecting to what we thought, we hoped we covered previously. So I would just take a little bit more time there. And so when we think of those implications, I'll just put out here this concept for folks that Chris and I will probably be referring back to a few more times. And so it helps us get a little more specific using what we call the 5 core competencies for social emotional learning. And so I'm just going to reference them very quickly. Typically, I'd be showing you a PowerPoint and you would see this wheel with the CASEL 5 core competencies. And so CASEL is the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. A lot of folks have probably now found that website already, casel.org, and you've probably seen that wheel. But I just want to help connect those 5 parts just real briefly. So if we think of, self-awareness, self-awareness includes things like knowing that you're afraid, knowing that you're worried. And I think even as us as adults, sometimes we miss our own cues, and we might think we're frustrated, but we're actually sad. And so really having a pretty good handle on self-awareness and helping children understand that is going to go a long way. So self-awareness then can turn into self-management, right? So you can't really manage your body, manage your emotions, your thoughts, if you don't really know the core, the cause of what you're feeling. So we have, our self-awareness, self-management, and then that lets us go towards social awareness. And, I know everyone's thinking a lot more, thank goodness, these days about equity. And so that's really fits in that area of social awareness too. Like, what have other people's experiences been? And so for all the adults here, you have your colleagues you're going to be connecting with soon. I would really check in with people. Like, how has their experience been? Some people, their last few months has been fine. They've made good use of it and they haven't been greatly affected in any negative ways. Other people have been hugely affected. So we could expect people might act differently, right? And so social awareness leads us into relationship skills. And, we need to kind of have that awareness to have our good relationship skills. And then the 5th one that when we talk about the 5 core competencies is that decision-making, responsible decision-making. And so we've, for a long time, been trying to help students make good choices behaviorally, academically. As social emotional learning just helps us really explicitly focus on it.
Wow, I feel like I already learned a lot, Kim. Thank you. That's just question 1. Just wanted to kind of recap what I heard from you.
Sure.
I heard The safety being a big thing to consider even more now than ever before. Ensuring that connectedness and that relationship building with our kiddos and our colleagues. Really not forgetting our adults in this social emotional state and making sure that we're remembering them and keeping them at the forefront. And then ensuring we're connecting to prior knowledge. That was the first part of your answer, yeah. And the second part was not forgetting those castle competencies around self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and making good decisions.
Awesome. Good job. We're
Okay.
done.
No, but at least now I know what to look back at. Second question from our team here is, how will you establish and communicate social emotional learning best practices in an online environment?
Yeah. So I know a lot of people are anxious about online now, right? The good, bad news is I think most teachers have had more experience learning online than they ever, probably like in the last 4 months, people have learned online more than they probably ever had in their career up to that point, right? So I want everyone to be thinking about what you liked and didn't like when you were a learner online. And that really gets to that idea of your own self-awareness and also perspective taking. So how might students feel on their end, right? Do you prefer it when you get to kind of sit back and just listen? Or do you prefer to be more interactive? Do you like having your camera on, or do you not like it on? And so, social emotional learning asks us to really have a big dose of compassion as educators and leaders. And I think the best way to get at that is to kind of be aware of yourself and how you feel about these things, and knowing that everyone's different. So you might love certain things that some of other adults or students won't love. But just to kind of keep that in mind as you go through all of this work. So when we think of online, a lot of things you used to do in person, you can still do online. And so I know some folks are feeling like it's going to have to be hugely different, but I would say it might not need to be hugely different in a few areas. So the first thing for social emotional learning best practice is try to embed it everywhere all day. And so I know some schools for quite a while they've been kind of crossing off the box of SEL by having like a 30-minute lesson maybe once a week for a whole class. So remember, if it's the whole class, that's tier 1. And 30-minute lesson is fine to do, however you build those in, tier 1 for all students. But probably when you think about it, you'd say, well, that's probably not enough for some students, right? That might not be enough for everyone. But the other thing is, it's kind of hard to shut off social skills, right? You can't really say like, we're going to focus on social skills right now, class, and then say, okay, no more of that. Now we're going to go right into something else. So I would say really try to embed them all day in all of your lessons online. And that includes how you open, right? So when you open virtual learning, having some music on, maybe letting students choose. They can all take turns what song is going to play. I've been on sessions with adults where the music is on in the beginning and we're all kind of like dancing and hanging out a little bit, and it's kind of fun to just see each other and kind of dance together. And then you jump in, right? So this idea of how you start matters. And then during your sessions, the way you all have been doing these breaks, right? And so really making sure you build in even just every few minutes, just to remind everyone, take a breath, right? Like right now, we could all just take a breath, right? Kind of make sure our shoulders are relaxed, and so there's little ways all throughout your learning and your teaching that you can build in, and you don't have to like wait for the block that's going to be SEL, right? And then even how you integrate it in academics. So I think not everyone realizes you can really address social emotional learning through your academic instruction. So how could you connect like math with responsible decision making? Or how could you cover social awareness during an English lesson? How could history teach us some stuff about relationship skills, right? And so really highlighting those skills where they were and weren't displayed, in history, in literature, is a way to really make sure that it's embedded all throughout. So I'd say embed is the first. The second thing for best practice is to partner with others. So it's sort of like we have to play well with others if we want our children to play well with others. And part of that is including your families. So everyone, the people who know me here know that I talk a lot about family partnerships, and you'll see a lot of the work around equity and with social emotional learning really says we have to bring the families with us. So now that you're learning online, now that you might be teaching online, I think everyone's gotten a better appreciation for teachers, but they've also gotten a greater appreciation for families, right? Realizing that our parents need to know what the lessons are, what we're teaching, and why. Our families need to know how to do it. So anything you do around social emotional learning, if you could, consider sharing it with your families. Give them the same tools, give them the same lessons that you're teaching others. And on that note, actually, Krista, I'm working with a group. We just put together an ebook. It's a free ebook resource for families for using these strategies at home. Really, that relates like positive psychology, which is all about all of the above. So I'll give you all the resources. Should be, I think it's being released next week, and you can forward it. Yeah. Thank you. Because so often the resources do sometimes have to look a little different to be family friendly, right? They don't always have to be totally different, but sometimes they have to have a little bit of a different spin on them to be family friendly. So what Castle would say in terms of best practice, they're using this acronym SAFE. So S for sequence, A for active, F for focused, and E for explicit. And so this idea of, how do we teach social emotional skills? Active is like making them interactive lessons. We don't want to just talk about it. We actually want to say, okay, now in the chat box, give a nice message to a friend. In the chat box, ask a friend how they're doing, right? Or maybe giving assignments, to have a conversation with someone where you're really going to focus on your listening skills. So, how do we make it active? And then sequenced, the first letter is really about just making sure it's connected to everything else. It shouldn't feel like totally out of place. So if you're doing an online lesson and students aren't really engaging, you might then say, let's talk a little bit about, self-awareness. How do you all feel right now? Are you feeling tired? Are you sleeping? Are you out there? But like try to like make it connected to the moment. And that F, the focus part, is really almost making it relevant and meaningful. So focused on the personal. So how does this fit for your students? That we don't want it to feel like this sort of separate kind of far out thing. We really want it to feel like, oh, I need this skill to date. I need this skill to get a job. I need this skill to have good relationships with friends. And I love the explicit part, because that should feel a lot like what we talk about with positive behavior supports, right? We say, you need to use direct instruction. We need to actually teach the behaviors. We need to, with academic RTI, you need to, explicitly teach the rules and expectations. And so I hope that idea feels sort of familiar for folks, of how we would do that. And, along those lines of embedding it in everything we do, and connecting it to everything else too. Just that note that when you think of your school-wide behavior matrix, can you put social emotional learning in there when you're teaching your lessons, when you're doing acknowledgement systems online? Are we really referencing social skills? Are students only getting acknowledged for academic behaviors, or are they also getting acknowledged for their social skills? So I hope that helps a little bit in terms of some best practice. And I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit more, but just a couple quick examples that folks could use virtually. We can set up cooperative learning and teamwork. And I think people kind of miss that online. They forget all the things they used to do in person. They feel like they can't do that anymore. You can have students go out into breakout rooms, or you can have them pair up and then they can call each other on the phone. So students can still work in pairs and teams, and even multi-age group, or we call cross-age. So it turns out that, humans are supposed to learn in cross-age groups. We've kind of gotten that wrong for a while in education, and it is what it is. But can we do anything about that now? Would the virtual environment allow us to let older students mentor younger students, or even students who are farther along in the curriculum? How can we use them to help the other students do the work? So don't feel like, oh, we can't practice our social skills. You can still have student leaders. You can still do, student mentors. And of course, the best thing with social emotional learning, probably the biggest best practice, is for adults to model. So we have to model our social skills. You know, it's very hard to be like angry and frustrated and be teaching students how to have, you know, self-control. So whatever we can do to take care of ourselves is going to go a long way.
Perfect. I want to make sure again that I stayed with you. So
Yeah.
the first big tip was about embedding social emotional learning all day long, right? Thinking about what we do online, thinking about what we've liked, but also recognizing that others don't learn exactly like we do. Making sure that we don't make it sound like you can shut social emotional learning off. That's just silly, right? Making sure that that's part of everything that we do. Thinking about partnerships and how we partnership with others, specifically remembering the importance of families and parents during this time. This is a partnership like we've never seen it before. And then we really liking that acronym around safe, sequence, active, focus, and explicit about the work that we're doing. Yes.
Snap.
Yeah. Oh, I like the snaps.
Snap.
Okay, perfect. So with that, we'll go to question 3, which is more about monitoring. So how will you monitor and support the mental health and emotional well-being of students and staff during the school year, or how should we?
Yeah. So that could probably sound like a scary question to some people, right? When you think of, you know, monitoring mental health for staff, that's like a pretty big statement, right? But when you think about it, a lot of leaders have and colleagues have done this informally for a long time. So on the informal note, it's checking in with people, right? And kind of having the courage to say, are you okay? You know, you don't quite seem like yourself. You know, what are you feeling right now? You know, and try to engage people in that conversation. Do you need anything? Do you need any support? Do you need any help? And that also goes for, you know, asking for it, right? So we also have to be ready to ask for help too. But so in an informal way, you can just ask your colleagues, ask your students, ask your families how they're doing. So like don't feel like that's not enough. That's a great step to take, and I think, you know, it's one that you might not have always done in the past. You know, I think a lot of the new work on social emotional learning, Dr. Mark Brackett, a lot of people have been following and seeing his work. I'll reference his work again probably while we talk. But so Mark Brackett has the book Permission to Feel. And, you know, the kind of joke is we always say, how are you? But we don't really want the answer. You know, it's like, how are you? Fine, great. Okay, see you later. You know, and it really made me realize how guilty I am of that too. I just always say, how are you? Great. You know, we just kind of move on. But do you really want to know how someone is? And sometimes that's a big answer. Okay, so on a more formal level, what I would recommend is for people to use a lot of the structures you've probably already created. So people are probably used to this concept of database decision making. And so you can have database decision rules for social emotional support as well as for academic behavior and everything else. So when it comes to your students and staff, you know, does attendance tell you something maybe about how well someone's doing? And there's a good chance it does, right? It tells you maybe whether they're sick or not, but a lot of times it tells you if they don't feel emotionally or mentally or socially ready for the thing they have to take on, right? And so you can use some database decision rules on attendance to say, when do we need to check in with some more children or staff? Like what's our kind of cut line to say, we think there might be a challenge here and we want to give extra support, right? So we're talking about monitoring and supporting. So for monitoring, you could create these database decision rules around attendance, around work completion. You could use surveys. And so there's all kinds of ways to survey. You can use surveys that already exist. You can make up your own. Again, you can have them slightly more informal or more formal, just to be letting people know that you care and you're asking and see where folks are at. But the kind of more formal, newer model of getting data on how people are doing is you could use what's called the mood meter. And I sent a PowerPoint that folks can look at. It's not exactly aligned with this talk, but it's a material. It was a resource that was put together in partnership with Riverside County. Really great work with Kathy King around empathy. And so you'll see the mood meter in there if you haven't seen it before. And of course, everyone listening, if you want more information about social emotional learning, let your county office here know and we'll get you more support, right? But so this idea of a mood meter asks people to say, you know, how much energy do they have and how much pleasantness do they have? There's kind of X and Y axis. And so you can embed that into every lesson every morning and do a check-in. How's everyone doing? And when students report, very low energy, very low pleasantness, more than once, more than twice, more than 3 times, you decide on the database decision rule, then that might indicate you're going to kick in and provide tier 2 or additional support for them. If staff are in that space, you might ask for them to stay after a meeting or call them personally after the meeting and say, how are you? How can I help? So, there's informal and then the formal methods. A lot of them folks already kind of know how to do, but we want to now connect it to this idea of social emotional wellness and to really know that they really do work for families and children, right? And to really be thinking of that 3-tiered model. So we're gonna do all this for everyone. We're gonna check in on everyone, but then who do we maybe need to check in on more frequently? And I think a lot of folks struggled with this with online learning, in the last few months. We lost some students. And so I would have those database decision rules be sort of low, like after they've missed, 1 or 2 days, after they've missed 1 or 2 classes online. I would very quickly try to get some kind of contact back with the children and families, because I know in some cases it went kind of long and then it seemed really hard to ever have them come back around. So that's about monitoring. So about supporting, the good thing is some of those same measures to monitor also sort of count as support. So asking someone how they're doing in a genuine, authentic way is an act of care. So, you're checking in as a monitoring, but it's also a support. And using the mood meter is actually also considered an intervention because it's helping humans label their emotions and helping them share their emotions. And it's then related to what we call regulating your emotions. So what you'll see in that PowerPoint that I posted, I gave as a resource, is I'll talk about the ruler method. And so the ruler method, spelled like a ruler, R-U-L-E-R, is one of the things that comes out of this work with Dr. Mark Brackett, and it goes with the mood meter, right? A lot of you have probably already been seeing this. And, the bottom line of it is like, how do we recognize our feelings, understand our feelings, label, express, and then regulate? So that's your ruler. So you're going to recognize, you're going to understand, you're going to label, you're going to express, and you're going to regulate. And so, sometimes those steps happen really quickly, and sometimes there's a lot more time in between. But so that's a strategy that you all could teach your staff and you could teach your students, just recognize our emotions, saying what they are. A lot of times our adolescents, they think they're mad, right? Everyone thinks adolescents are either mad or apathetic. Like those are the 2 things they get all the time. But, sometimes our adolescents are sad or confused, right? And so what we do to support them and what we say to them is going to matter a lot based on our sort of assessment and their assessment of how they're feeling. So just know, one of the strategies is to use that kind of concept, even if you don't officially use ruler, this idea of helping people just to be mindful of how they're feeling and, what's going on. And so I think for support for adults, I'll explicitly reference all of the things I've said, I think are fit for both adolescent, youth and adults. But we gave one other resource from Castle called the 3 signature SEL practices. I think that was included in one of the things that folks will get from me. And so these 3 practices are really basic. And I think, Krista, you and your team are using them. Like you have a nice opening, right? You have like an interactive, happy opening. And so and all of you out there listening, when you have meetings with your staff, when you have a PD, start with some music, start with letting people just chat. A lot of my trainings now I'll have like a coffee chat, and it's like, we're not really officially starting till 8, but come on in at 7:30 if you want, and we'll just talk and hang out and have coffee together the way we would have done if we went to a conference, right? So the first signature SEL practice for adults is this like warm opening. And then the second thing is like, what do we do during the event? And so I love the picture you had up, your break picture, right? It's such a beautiful, and is that a local picture? Is that from your area?
Oh no, that's from Canva.
Oh, okay, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's like getting towards the mountains. Kind of look a little familiar. So it's just so nice to show, show a pretty picture, something that's calm. And so when you do these called brain breaks, so during your session, kind of to stop. And so like right now, I'll just give a quick example. we could do a brain break together right now, everyone. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to say for just a moment, check in with your physical body. So everyone, just like, how are you sitting? How are your shoulders? How are your feet? Does anyone want to stand up? Does anyone want to stretch? Maybe a breath again. How's your neck feel? All right. Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and continue. So that was what, like 15 seconds, right? But Krista, isn't it wild when you hear someone say the word breath, it makes you focus on your breath. And when you hear someone say, how's your posture? It kind of makes you push your shoulders back and sit up. So that's the second signature practice, is just to build in these kind of nice transitions. And then the third one, these are all, I feel like, so simple, is just like optimistic closure. So just ending on a positive note. So whatever meeting you're having with your staff, and when you're doing this with students, you know, how can you end it on a positive note? So I hope that feels like a really simple, easy way to embed SEL into how we support adults.
Love it. I love the intentionality of that as well. I think some of those things we do and we don't know what we're doing, but calling it out and sharing with others is really helpful. I have for informal, just kind of making sure I'm with you, checking in with people, fill in both categories, informal and supportive, as long as it's authentic, great. For informal, having some, or so for formal, really making this also about data-based decision making. Having those cut points where you have specific actions you know you're going to take based on the data that's being presented to you. And then in terms of support, again, checking in, the use of the mood meter is helpful. I actually saw a school that had the mood meter spray painted on their field. I don't know if you've seen that. That was so cool. And then kids went and literally physically placed themselves on the meter. What a great idea. And then adults, we just covered those 3 signature practices. So making sure you have a warm, happy opening, some brain breaks throughout the session, and an optimistic closure.
Perfect. Thank you. And I love people are typing in the chat. Thank you, everyone. And hi to those who are saying hi to me. There is a mood meter app. So thank you for pointing that out. So you can download it on your phone. I know adults who are downloading it on their phone and using it just to kind of check in with themselves. So everyone, thank you again for your comments in the chat and for sharing with each other, because we know so many of you have tackled this already, right? I mean, so please share with each other as we go here and beyond.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. So moving into our next question, which we kind of talked about for a second, how might you include SEL strategies in what you're already doing?
Yeah. So yeah, and I did already reference this a bit, but I'll specifically just give a few more details on this. So I, like you kind of, when you read my bio, you know, the thing that's important to me is that we do good work and we make it doable. So we want to do good work and have adults feel like it's possible to pull this off. It's possible to do it and not feel so overwhelmed. So I feel like adults for so long, educators, you know, have just been overwhelmed and sometimes then frustrated because we have all these acronyms. So if you're thinking like, oh, in our school, we do MTSS and PBIS and SEL and RTI and UDL, right? I know, and restorative practices, then that would feel very overwhelming. So it's better to think, okay, we have a 3-tiered approach to everything we do. And that means that for everything we do, we give all students some support. We give all students access to like how to solve problems and have restoration when things go wrong. And we make it clear to all students what we expect them to do behaviorally. And we give all students good first instruction, right? So this is what we do for all students. We're gonna embed social skills into everything we do. So that's everyone. And then the 3-tiered approach, which really comes within all those acronyms, just says, now look at what happens, who responded well, who didn't, and what could we do next? And so when you, that's going to give you probably your tier 2 interventions, right? What's the next layer of support some students and even some staff might need? And then, you know, when that's still not enough, what's the 3rd layer? So I think way too often we try something, we feel like it didn't solve all the problems, so we say, that didn't work, and we stop it. But those of you who've trained with me before, I really want to help coach people into saying, it's not that that didn't work. It's that that's not, and I'm expecting a whole bunch of people around are saying in their mind, enough, right? That's not enough. So support for everyone plus check and check out might not be enough for some students, but it doesn't mean check and check out doesn't work for them. It's just not enough. And then some students need a mentor also, but for some students, that's still not enough. And they might need a function-based assessment plan or a wraparound plan. So I would love it if people would think of how are you going to embed social emotional learning into your 3 tiers of support that you already have. So if you're doing, reading, if a youth is getting a tier 2 reading intervention, starting that online virtual reading lesson with a quick check-in and making sure they feel okay and asking, how do you feel about reading lesson? That's a little way to embed social emotional learning into a tier 2 reading intervention, right? Having the reading content be related to things students like, an area that they have a strength in, because we tend to know the words related. If you like basketball, you know basketball words, right? If you like the outdoors, then you might know the names of mountains and rivers and lakes. So, using students' strengths for what you choose regarding academic content whenever possible is a subtle way to include social emotional learning. So, that's the thing, is think about how you're supporting all the youth, and then and that should be hopefully embedded in like your school-wide PBIS matrix, within the sit still, focus, sign in online on time, all those expectations, which I'm thinking a lot of you have now made virtually, right? So if your virtual behavioral expectations, if you haven't yet, you probably want to work on that. So use your school-wide expectations, whatever they always were, be safe, responsible, respectful, whatever, and then make that for, virtual learning. And you can break that down even to a few areas, right? Like independent work when you're on your own, peer work, and then when you're live, synchronous and asynchronous, right? So the idea of just taking whatever we talked about here and any other learning you do around social emotional learning and embedding it in to all the other things you're doing, so that you don't have to ever go back and tell your staff, like, now we're doing SEL. I don't feel like that is usually absorbed very well. I think it should really be more like, this is going to be a part of everything else we do. And I do a lot of coaching. One of the main things I do training and coaching. I try to use social emotional skills when I'm coaching to really get to know people and be strength-based with them. So whatever PD you're taking on, try to consider how can you weave social emotional learning in to all the other PD, all the other coaching, all the other support you're giving people, instead of it being a separate thing.
Love that. So you are reading my mind, because the next question you answered. So we're going to skip that one, I think. But want to just make sure I got the big points from this section. Obviously, the big point from all of this is not to throw away practices, but to think about, is that enough? Love that. We should all just get shirts that say, is it enough? That's the next thing on my to-do list. Also really important to make sure that we're doing work that is doable. Good, important work that's doable work, so we don't just overwhelm and become, unable to do the work. And then really connecting to student strengths so that there's more engagement in the work. Yes?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay. So then she was really clear in her response about that tiered response, right? What we're doing for all kids, some kids, and few kids, and even gave us an example. So appreciate that, covering that. That's also on your plan. So she covered that for us. You've talked a lot about equity today, but can you really specifically talk about what equity considerations may apply to social emotional learning?
Yeah. So, it's funny because I think I speak in the tiers. So, almost everything I say, I end up tiering it, right? And so that the tiers relate to equity too, really, because, part of equity is making sure everyone gets what they need. And so we want to do our best for everyone the first time, but we should assume that some students are going to need more, right? They're going to need more explicit instruction with social skills, more explicit support emotionally. And so part of equity is really looking at your 3 tiers and how are we compassionately delivering additional support, right? So I think it's so easy in school. I think for a long time, education has been sort of focused on compliance. And the part that's just like a little heartbreaking about that is that, education is this awesome opportunity our children have, But, if I told you you had to eat this chocolate cake, you might not enjoy it as much as if I said, hey, you have an invitation to some chocolate cake, right? And so I think if we could stop looking at like attendance problems as something that need to be punished, as like students just being difficult, and instead consider it like they're not engaging, they're not responding to our invitations. RTI is response to intervention, but I've started kind of playfully saying it's also response to invitation, right? And so like some students, some families are not responding to our invitation. So what can we do differently? So on that note, so one thing is, to tier everything we do, be prepared to give additional layers of support based on strengths and needs. So remember that a 3-tiered model is not just for deficits. And that's part of equity, is that we have students who are advanced in certain areas, and sometimes we hold them back. And so part of equity is letting students go faster if they want to go faster, and slower if they need to go slower. Another piece of equity, there's lots of ways to address equity when we think of like racial, ethnic diversity, gender fluidity, lots of areas, learning diversity, diversity of thought. There's all kinds of diversity, and lots of things you can do. But the thing that's like the closest to my heart is to give voice and choice. And so, just think of how often are you asking your students what they want and what they like and what they don't like, and asking your families what they want and what they like and what they don't like. And when families and students feel like you're genuinely asking for their feedback, and they feel like they can genuinely give information that will be acted on. So a big part of equity is sharing decision making. So, I think long ago, and we've all learned a lot more since then, but long ago we'd have like activities, maybe like cultural types of activities, and they were very one-sided, like we're going to do this thing and you can come or not. It's good to celebrate people and celebrate culture, but if we're not then letting those same families, or at least some of them, have a voice in our discipline policy, and have a voice into the schedule we roll out for virtual learning, and have a voice into how much homework we assign, right? Then we're really not respecting the diversity of thought, which goes across all those other forms of diversity. So family and youth voice, you kind of can't go wrong. If you're going to go there, you will get equity, because you will get the voice of everyone. You will have shared decision making. And the last thing I'll say just quickly is, on the Castle website, I'm so impressed how responsive so many groups have been recently, more with Black Lives Matter, and really taking equity on more head on. And so lots of websites, you've probably seen lots of work where they're explicitly calling out. And so at Castle, what they did is they're talking about transformational social emotional learning framework. So transformational SEL, and they've sort of expanded or elaborated on the definitions of those 5 core competencies to kind of include some equity in there. And so when you think about, perspective taking, that goes a long way. When we talk about what does it feel like to be in someone else's shoes, we can't go there, but we can ask, we can listen, we can try to understand and try to support. So if equity is a big focus for you in your sites right now, and I'm hoping it is for most, when you download those 5 core competencies from the Castle website, you can choose to download the definitions that are under the equity area, and they're called transformational SEL, and that will kind of put a little bit more of that spin on there, that kind of goes a little deeper into equity within SEL.
Wow, thank you so much, Kim. Voice and choice seem to be very important as the same stakeholders who are wanting to be our partners in this work, right? Really being explicit about asking them what they want, what they like, and what they don't like, and then using that data to inform our decisions. So they feel like there really is shared decision making, making sure they're at the table. I love that you just said like tier everything. That's going to be our next hashtag, tier everything. And then be prepared to respond to those tiers, right? Make sure that you have a plan based on those tiers. And then just being really thoughtful about diversity of thought in general, and using some of that transformational SEL to guide our decision making as we prepare.
Nice.
Yes? Okay. I'm going to feel like I can speak Kim Breen by the end of this.
Yes, I know you are.
The last official question, then we'll hopefully have a second to open it up to the room. But the last official question on my little list here is, if you could give only one piece of advice to teachers and school leaders about meeting students' social emotional needs, what would it be?
So if there was only one thing, in order to help our students socially and emotionally, I would say, in terms of meeting students' needs, meet your own first. And I just cannot emphasize that enough. So literally, if there was one thing, meet your own social emotional needs first, and you will be better at doing it for your students. And you cannot do it well for your students if you don't meet your own first. So, you know, I've done lots of coaching over the years, and I just as a quick example, I worked with a woman in a unique kind of school setting, and so often when I had coaching sessions with her and she was in meetings, you know, her face looked like she was going to cry. She was kind of almost always holding back, you know, and I don't know if it was frustration, tension, sadness, but if we were alone, I would definitely say, you know, are you okay? Can we talk? But you could almost tell that she wouldn't want that because she didn't want it to come out. So we have to know that children can see us. They can see how we're feeling, you know, and for parents, your children can see you. Um, so one of the things I've started doing in terms of taking care of myself, but also trying to model for my son. So many of you know, my son has autism. He's 11 right now. And so where I think I used to try to always act strong and tough and brave, and I think we do that as teachers and as parents, I've started over the last year or so saying, you know, oh, I'm so tired. And I'll like make sure I look, you know, I'm so tired, you know, so ask me why, you know, why are you tired, mom? Oh, I worked so hard today. Ask me what I need, you know, what do you need, mom? I would love like 5 minutes of eye rest before we start playing. I would just love to rest my eyes for 5 minutes before we jump right from my work to playing, which is typically my life. Like I work and then I play. And so, you know, then I realized like I've robbed him of that all those other years, because how does he get to practice his social skills if he can't have empathy for me, right? And I'll say, you know, do you feel bad for me? You know, and I know that might sound silly, but I think everyone, whether your children have special needs or not, your spouses, you know, we have to let people know what we need, because I think then sometimes we get resentful, right? Oh, my spouse didn't notice, my children don't care. But you know, they just might not know how to go about it, and they might not know how you want them to go about it. So take care of yourself first, and that includes asking for help. That includes letting yourself be weak, letting yourself be vulnerable. And I know that feels really scary. But I kind of feel like I'm my most courageous when I'm feeling vulnerable. So, you know, I feel like being vulnerable is like the most courageous thing you could do. That, you know, most of us are, you know, trying to act brave so much. So, yeah, I hope that helps a bit. I promise I'm not being silly. There's research that shows that a principal who has good emotional intelligence helps their teachers to have better social skills and be more effective. And teachers who have good emotional intelligence help their students to be better learners. So, you know, there's definitely a connection to all of that.
Love it. So meet your own SEL needs first so you can be better for those who you serve. Pretty much sums up your comment there, but really thinking about asking for help and being vulnerable so that those around us know what we need.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Okay, everyone start right now. Ready? Tell someone what you need.
Right.
Something to think about tonight as we leave the conference. But we have about 10 minutes, and I know that there are lots of thoughts. So if anyone wants to hit Kim with their own question right now, go ahead and throw it in the chat or the Q&A, and I'd be happy to ask her on your behalf.
Awesome.
Back up the chat and see if there was any I missed.
As folks are thinking of questions too, you know, just on that last note, you know, be kind to yourselves as well. Like, you're all doing great work. You care, you're here, you're trying to learn and you're trying to implement new things. Try your best to not feel like you have to do everything covered in these 3 days exactly as laid out, immediately, right? So when you're writing your teaching and learning plans, and like Lisa put into the chat, the questions were lined up with what you're going to be writing into your plans. So take on the stuff that feels the most doable for you. You don't feel like you have to do. It's an evolution, right? So you're going to start somewhere, and then you can keep adding and growing over time. And a big thing I think is when we say ask for help, like go back to the county, let them know, what do you want more training on, what do you want more coaching on, what do your staff need coaching on, because it does take some time, right, to feel really comfortable. So I see comments. I don't know if there's questions. Are there any questions?
I don't see question, but I know that you have extensive expertise in coaching. So for those that are coaching other staff members around this work, do you have specific advice for coaches?
Sure. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, so I'll tell you, even for a county office too, that I think during this time, we might start to move towards more coaching and less what we used to consider like full day PD trainings, right? Just to respect the idea of letting people interact while they're learning. And so you can do that in full day PD sessions too, right? You can make them very interactive. And I know you guys design yours that way, to let people talk and ask questions and digest the work. So the idea of coaching to me is really being like a thought partner. And even I use the phrase like learning facilitator. So when I do a training, I consider myself a learning facilitator, not really a presenter. I don't want to like present the information. I want to facilitate your learning. So for everyone, and when you're in roles like mine, which I think many of you are, whether you're presenting or, thinking of learning facilitator, thinking of coaching, thinking of thought partner, you can't help someone get better in an area that they are not aware of their strengths and needs in. So people have to trust you. They have to feel comfortable with you. I can't tell you how many times like I've started with a group and they signed up for coaching and I'm like, okay, so what can I help you with? And they're like, we're good. And it's like, so, very rarely does any group, any person have everything in place, right? So you have to be okay to be vulnerable and say, well, I'm struggling in this area or that area. So as a coach, do everything you can to first relate with people, get to know them, let them, hopefully you start to like each other, you start to trust each other. And that's when then you can really coach them on the areas they need to improve. Otherwise, sometimes it can be a little smoke and mirrors. And I'm sure, Krista, you've seen that, right? They ask for help on like the best product they have. And, it's like they barely need help on that, but there's some other areas that probably really do need help. So know that it's hard, right? It's hard to get coaching because it means you're admitting that you need to grow, which we all do. So use your social skills as a coach. That would be my main thing there.
Love it. So while I asked that question, then like 4 people jumped in to ask questions. So
yeah.
I'm gonna start with the first one and we'll see how far we get.
Yeah.
Someone asked, how may one support those in the work of SEL when they feel that this doesn't apply to them or their style?
Good point. So I'm assuming that the person asking that, like they have to support that person who doesn't feel like it fits for them, right? Yeah. So like if you're supporting a person who doesn't feel like it fits for them, so here's kind of like a joke that I've heard over the years. People would say, we don't do PBIS. We're not into PBIS, right? We're not going to go there. We decided we don't like it, right? And so over my 20 years or so of doing PBIS, I've struggled different ways to support those people. And so just recently I started, I thought, well, so do you have rules? Do you think kids should have rules? And yes. Okay. Do you think kids should be taught those rules or just told? Well, yeah, we have to teach the rules. All right. So do you think that there should be negative consequences when they don't follow the rules? Yes, of course. Do you think those should be like clear and known to everyone? Do you think you should also catch kids making good choices, like in some way? Yes, of course. All right. So what do you think PBIS is, right? And so I think it's that when people say they don't like something, it's often that they don't really know it. And that goes for people too, right? We say, I don't like that person, but very rarely, usually it's because you don't even know that person that well, right? You can always find something that you connect with someone on. So I'd say don't push those people. I'd invite them, I'd expose them. I'd stop using the acronym SEL, and I would say things like, does everyone agree we should have a warm welcome to students online, that we should start, I'd like to propose that all classes are going to start with 3 minutes of just kind of hanging out time. And you get students kind of warmed up and wanting to come to class because they want to hear the song, and then we'll walk. So does anyone have an objection to starting the first 3 minutes that way? So like, we don't have to say we're going to do SEL. I would just break it down to the pieces of what it is. And I think the acronyms are what gets in the way of good educational reform. I think people make decisions about the acronym. It almost always, they think it's going to take away something they love. So people who love PBIS think SEL is going to replace PBIS. People who loved MTSS think, RTI is going to replace, so we need all of them, right? We need all of them, but maybe stopping the acronyms would help.
Great, thanks so much. The next question is, what is the best way to reach a student who's emotionally closed off?
Slowly. Be prepared for it to take a while. And that goes for your own children at home, right? I mean, I think a lot of us could practice with our own children. I think, so a student who is emotionally closed off, you want to be gentle, and you want to probably engage privately. Those students are probably not going to want you to call them out when they're in the class with everyone. I would maybe send a greeting card to their home. I would mail a card and say, I care about you. I would love to talk. Here's my email. Let me know. I don't care if it's 10 o'clock at night. What's the best time you want to talk? Now that's me. You guys could say I'm available 7 to 3. That's fine, right? Whatever your style is. But just plan on it taking many small steps to chip away to get them to a place where they feel safe. And then the other two things quickly, as I would say, consider going through someone who already has a relationship with that child. Do they have a friend? Is there a paraprofessional, a teacher assistant? There's so many things we're not going to have time to talk about today, but I really hope people are leveraging their paraprofessionals, teacher assistants, and all of their instructors, all of the adults who work in your building. If you're going to be virtual, they can be virtual mentors. We didn't get into it that much, but you can do check-in, check-out. You can do virtual check-in, check-out. And you can have some of those people run those interventions. You can do virtual mentoring. You can do virtual skills groups. So just know there's a way to do all those interventions that you used to do in person online. And so those kids probably need that, right? They need the teacher doing great, reach out, calm, slow, steady, kind. And then they might need to be recommended for a check-in, check-out, and they might need a support group or a one-on-one. And so see who else in their life might be able to reach them. And then also maybe the family. There's a good chance that maybe you want to say to the family, not he's in trouble or anything like that, but I care, I'm concerned.
Love that. So don't get discouraged. Know it takes time. Keep chipping away. Make it personal. Find someone else who maybe has a stronger relationship and use that relationship to kind of leverage your own. Yeah. Beautiful. Thanks so much. Questions just keep coming, Kim. Obviously, you're doing great. Next one says, what does Kim say regarding students, staff, parents, and how to best measure their sense of belonging? Ooh, I love that.
I know that. I love that too. So first, I love that you care that they want to feel they belong. It's a beautiful word, belonging, really. All of you, just think about where you feel like you belong and where you feel like you don't. It says so much. I would let people know that you care, that they feel like they belong. I would actually use that word and say it to your staff and your families. So you can do surveys to get a feeling for that, right? So you can make up your own, or you can find some, do you feel like the school is yours? Do you feel like an outsider when you come to the school? How warmly are you greeted? So you can use some measures, but I'll tell you, I think observation is the most important way for this question. Do families ever stop in to school? Do families ever call you when it's not an emergency, like, my child's IEP better be changed kind of thing, right? Because I think sometimes some people are afraid of family interactions because the only families who reach out sometimes are the ones who are at their wits' end. They're like, my child's not being served well, now I'm mad, right? And so I think families can get this bad rap for being kind of frustrated or mad. But that would tell you that all the other families don't really feel like the school is theirs, right? We want them to feel like they can stop in, they can talk to you. So I would observe, and then you could actually ask, and you don't even have to do surveys. You could call, hey, does your child feel like they belong at our school? Do you feel like you belong? And I would always start, I know we're at our time, I always would start with the families who you think aren't so happy. And I know it's hard to talk with those families sometimes, but I would always start with the ones who have had complaints, whose children had been suspended, who have been in trouble. You want to repair those relationships. And trust me, they know a lot of other people and they're talking to the other people. So if you don't repair those relationships, all those fun open house night things seem kind of inauthentic.
Beautiful. So really it's about observation and seeing what your families and kids are telling you, right? Also huge research on belonging. If you haven't done that research, especially around kids' success in college, really interesting research. For those of you who haven't looked at it, check it out. I missed one question earlier and I feel bad because they were at the top of the list. So do you care if I hit you with it's an easier one?
Sure.
They just want to know some sites they might be able to go to for like their staff to get like emotional intelligence information or surveys.
Sure. All right, so I'll be very quick. So there are a lot. But so really, I know I've referenced them already a couple of times, but CASEL is kind of like the go-to spot right now, CASEL.org. They've really stepped up their game. Their website looks awesome. It's very easy to navigate. So CASEL is one. PBIS.org, honestly, is one too. So a lot of people talk about social, emotional, behavioral support. So that's really combining like what we think of as like PBIS and SEL. So their site also has a lot of great new social emotional learning work there. And then swiftschools.org. Many of you know Swift helped get kind of MTSS going in some ways in California. Swiftschools.org also has material where they show how you integrate SEL into an MTSS framework and more, but I'll stop there.